Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, 2nd edition, translated with introduction, notes, and glossary by Terence Irwin. Book 10, Chapter 1, Pleasure. The right approach to pleasure. The next task, presumably, is to discuss pleasure, for it seems to be especially proper to our animal kind. That is why, when we educate children, we steer them by pleasure and pain. Besides, enjoying and hating the right thing seems to be the most important for virtue of character. For pleasure and pain extend through the whole of our lives and are of great importance for virtue and the happy life, since people decide on pleasant things and avoid painful things. Least of all, then, it seems, should these topics be neglected, especially since they arouse much dispute. For some say pleasure is the good, while others, on the contrary, say it is altogether base. Presumably, some who say it is base say so because they are persuaded that it is so. Others, however, say it because they think it is better for the conduct of our lives to present pleasure as base even if it is not. For, they say, the many lean toward pleasure and are slaves to pleasure, and that is why we must lead them in contrary direction, because that is the way to reach the intermediate condition. However, this is wrong, for arguments about actions and feelings are less credible than the facts. Hence, any conflict between arguments and perceptible facts arouses contempt for the arguments, and moreover undermines the truth as well as the arguments. For if someone blames pleasure, but then has been seen to seek it on some occasions, the reason for his lapse seems to be that he regards every type of pleasure as something to seek, for the many are not the sort to make the distinctions. True arguments, then, would seem to be the most useful, not only for knowledge, but also for the conduct of life. Since they harmonize with the facts, they are credible, and so encourage those who comprehend them to live by. Enough of this, then. Let us consider now what has been said about pleasure. Book 10, Pleasure, Part 2, Arguments about Pleasure. Eudoxus thought that pleasure is the good, because he saw that all animals, both rational and non-rational, seek it, and in everything, he says, what is choice-worthy is good, and what is most choice-worthy is supreme. The fact that all are drawn to the same thing, pleasure, indicates in his view that it is best for all, since each kind of animal finds its own good, just as it finds its own nourishment. And what is good for all, what we all aim at, is the good. These arguments of his were found credible because of his virtuous character, rather than on their own merits. For since he seemed to be outstandingly temperate, he did not seem to be saying this because he was a friend of pleasure. Rather, it seemed that he said was how it really was. He thought it was no less evident from consideration of the contrary. For pain in itself, he said, is something to be avoided for all, so that similarly, its contrary is choice-worthy for all. What is most choice-worthy is what we choose not because of, or for the sake of, anything else. And it is agreed that this is the character of pleasure, since we never ask anyone what his end is in being pleased, because we assume that pleasure is choice-worthy in itself. Moreover, he argued, when pleasure is added to any other good, to just or temperate action, for instance, it makes that good more choice-worthy, and good is increased by the addition of itself. This last argument, at least, would seem to present pleasure as one good among others, no more a good than any other. For the addition of any other good makes a good more choice-worthy than it is all by itself. Indeed, Plato uses this sort of argument to undermine the claim of pleasure to be the good. For, he argues, the pleasant life is choice-worthy when combined with prudence than it is without it. And if the fixed good is better, pleasure is not the good, since nothing can be added to the good to make it more choice-worthy. Nor clearly could anything else be the good, if it is made more choice-worthy by the addition of anything that is good in itself. And what is the good that meets this condition, and that we share in also? That is what we are looking for. But when some object, that what everything aims at is not good, surely there is nothing in what they say. For if things seem good to all, we say they are good, and if someone undermines confidence in these, what he says will hardly inspire more confidence in other things. For if only animals without understanding desired these things, there would be something in the objection. But if prudent animals also desire them, how can there be anything in it? And presumably, even in inferior animals, there is something superior to themselves that seeks their own proper good. The argument about the contrary would also seem to be incorrect, For they argue that if pain is an evil, it does not follow that pleasure is a good, since evil is also opposed to evil, and both are opposed to the neutral condition, that pleasure or pain. The objector's general point here is right. What they say in the case mentioned is false. For if both pleasure and pain were evils, we would also have to avoid both. And if both were neutral, we would have to avoid neither, or else avoid both equally. Evidently, however, we avoid pain as an evil and choose pleasure as a good. Hence, this must also be the opposition between them.